Hello there, welcome back to the channel. I'm Richie and this is Dowie After Dark. Today I want to talk to you about some of my favourite units in the Dwarf book, whether this be in the Grand Army or in the Royal Clans or the X-Force. I think personally the Dwarves have some of the best infantry in the game. Unfortunately at the moment infantry isn't deemed the best because we've got so many flyers and really good cavalry units kicking around in the game. But I think if the game starts to change and we start to go down more objective-based games, then infantry is really going to have its time to shine. We definitely have some of the best infantry stats in the entire game, and there's a lot that we can do and a lot of play arounds to try and get around the poor movement. So when you're looking at them and it's only movement 3, you don't have to worry about that at all. There's a lot of workarounds around that. And there's also a lot that we can do to buff up those infantry units. So before I get going, listing my favourite units in the Dwarf books, what are your favourite units? And if you disagree with me, let me know why. I am going to do a few different reasons why I've left some of the better choices out, because unfortunately, I'm not going to be putting hammerers into my favourite units. And I'm going to explain why in a little bit. So first, I'm going to talk about the Dwarf Warrior. Yes, it's our cheapest infantry, and it's also strength 3, but they really perform their job role on the tabletop amazingly. So let's have a look at their stats. So the Dwarf Warriors with movement 3, weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 3, strength 3, toughness 4, 1 wound, initiative 2, 1 attack, and leadership 9 for a base of 8 points. For an extra 1 point per model, you can add great weapons, and exactly the same for shields. You can upgrade a veteran for 5, upgrade to a standard bearer for 5, upgrade a model to musician for 5. They can also be upgraded to have drilled for a point, veteran for a point, and have standard runes. Now these come with close order, hatred orcs and goblins, magic resist 1, resolute, and shield wall as standard. I absolutely love the Dwarf Warrior. Now for 12 points base a model, you can have great weapon, hand weapon and shield, drilled, and veteran. That makes them very, very versatile. You don't really have to worry about screams or leadership debuffs too much because you've got the veteran rerolls. So say those caskets are opening on you, you do get to reroll against that. So that is absolutely amazing. Drilled means that you can fan out, you can get larger when you follow up. You can also move from marching column into charging, which is really handy. Just because they don't cost much, you can create a really nice bunker for your heroes to sit in and just basically be ablative wounds to your challenging out heroes. With toughness 4 and a 4-up save, it's going to be relatively hard for stuff to chew through them. Obviously, you're still going to have to watch out for lances and impact hits, but this unit can take the Rune of Hesitation, so it does stop that from happening. So you don't have to worry about those extra AP or strengths from those if you wanted it. The reason I love this unit so much, and I potentially think it is one of our best units, the fact that it's cheap, it's in the core, and it is so versatile. Whether that be tanking wounds, so if you get the Anvil spell for +1 save and rerolls, suddenly this unit with its shields is on a 3-up save, rerolling everything, and then if you have a hero in there with the Banner of Grugni with a 5-up ward, then suddenly it becomes a really tanky unit. Also with shield wall, which then means if you're charged into, you roll a fallback in good order, you can then change that to a give ground, giving the rest of your units time to come up round, try and get some flank charges or rear charges with some gyrocopters, or just generally trap those dragons in place. There's a few different ways that you can play this unit as well. This would be to yeet this unit across the board. You can move this unit 27 inches turn 1 if you wanted to. There's not many times that you would want to do that, but if you're playing against an Empire gunline or against, say, Caskets of Souls, or anything that's going to be in a fixed position that you know you're going to be able to charge into, but isn't going to be able to charge you that turn, this is a really, really good tactic for that. The way that you get the 27-inch movement with this is you take the Vanguard banner on the unit, so they get an extra 3-inch move before the game starts. Then you start them in marching column, march them up 3 times, so that's a 12-inch move, and then you crack the anvil to be able to move again. So suddenly 27 inches in turn 1. Now, if you've got a massive brick of warriors that's only an inch away from the enemy turn 1, that can throw a lot of people off the game and can help us win those games. This is a really fun tactic, but please don't try it against anything that's kind of relying on charging you, because then you've only got 1 unit out there in the open. Something that you can do with this is put it within 1 inch of something that would have impact hits, so suddenly it's not getting them anymore. So that's also a good way that you can use these. Everyone's always really, really happy about +1 to cast, but then doesn't say that magic resist 1 is that big. I personally think that any debuffs to magic is really, really good. So to round up on these, they're cheap, they're versatile, they can swap from hand weapon to shield to great weapons whenever you need them. Obviously, after the FAQ, you are stuck in the same that you picked in a combat for give grounds and fallback in good order. But if you're going into your turn and you've just won combat, try to restrain with them with your leadership 9 or leadership 10, and then charging in with your strength 5, AP 2, and AP 3 on 6s. That can do a lot of damage to most stuff. Remember, that is also wounding dragon on 5s most of the time. So if you can proc some dice, we can bring them down. They're just an all-round great unit. And for the cost and the fact they're in core, I don't think you can go wrong with a unit of warriors. I would probably put some heroes in there so they can be a nice little bunker. So maybe a runesmith and the BSB with Banner of Grugni, and potentially courage and a rune of battle. So if you put a rune of battle on the unit with a BSB in there with the rune of battle as well, you can get to a static combat res of 7 with these. Remember, the magic number against challenges out with dragons is 7, because they can do 6 wounds to us in a challenge if you accept with your champion, and then they get close order as well. But because we've got a musician, we then win that combat, and hopefully if you've got a big enough unit, you could double outnumber them as well. But what I prefer to do is to try and keep as many of the warriors alive as possible and challenge out with tanky heroes. Next up, a unit that I don't think needs too much introduction. So these are the Longbeards. Now, these are core in the Grand Army if you take a king. They're also core in the Royal Clans. I absolutely love Longbeards. They're just basically a much stronger and better version of warriors. The fact that you can take something this good in the core means that you're not relying on those points in special or rare, and you don't have to fill up your core with absolute rubbish. So this becomes a really, really good unit to use those core points on. With the standard dwarf movement of 3, weapon skill 5, ballistic skill 3, strength 4, toughness 4, 1 wound, initiative 2, 1 attack, and leadership 9 for 12 points base. Again, it's 1 point for great weapons, 1 point for shield, 6 points for upgrades into the champion, standard bearer, and musician. These guys can take a standard rune up to 50 points, talismanic and weapon runes for 25 points, and 1 can be drilled for 1,000 points. They have close order, Gromir weapons, hatred orcs and goblins, magic resist 1, resolute, shield wall, venerable, and veteran. The venerable rule means unless this unit is fleeing, friendly units within 6 inches can re-roll their panic tests. That is actually a really good rule, because you'd be surprised the stuff in the game that can force you to take panic checks, so that's really good. Now, the reason that I really like these, they're weapon skill 5. If you're fighting anything that's weapon skill 2, you're going to be able to put it on 2s, which is actually really nice. And then stuff is going to find it harder to hit you as well. Elite infantry hitting you on 4s rather than 3s can make a massive, massive deal in the game. Strength 4 base is also amazing as well, because when you've got your hand weapon and shield, you're strength 4 with a native AP 1 from Gromir weapons, which is really, really nice. So if you know that you're going to prefer to use the hand weapon and shield, you've at least got some AP and you've got a relatively good strength as well, rather than the strength 3 of the warriors. And on top of that, you have the great weapons being strength 6. Now, if you're taking Royal Clans, you can get Ancestral Fury rule, which means that if you charge over 3 inches or do any follow-up move, you get +1 to your strength. So if you've got your hand weapon and shields, then suddenly you're strength 5 following up, or if you've got your great weapons, you can be strength 7, which can make dragons cry. So that's really good. Something I like to do with these is if I have a runesmith in the unit, so that any 6s can proc to be AP 5. So if you can roll a load of 6s and you know that you're good at rolling 6s, these are definitely good to run in the Royal Clans. They also have inbuilt veteran, which was another one of my favourite things from the Dwarf warriors from earlier, so they can just re-roll leadership tests, which is also really, really handy. My tactics for these would be exactly the same with the warriors. I would be taking big blocks of them, whether that be 2 17-man blocks or just 1 almost 30-man block, creating a character bunker and then either yeeting that up the board to go deal some damage, or standing back and trying to do as much damage once the enemy gets to me as possible, becoming an anchor. The reason I like these so much is because they can be core. If I had to take them in special or rare, I probably wouldn't want to take them, but because you can sink your points in core into something that is actually really, really good and very, very versatile, because you can swap between those weapons, the same as the Dwarf Warriors, I think if you're taking a Royal Clans list, you definitely need to invest in some Longbeards. I think they're brilliant. The next unit that I think is absolutely amazing is the Rangers. These are everybody's favorite scout unit. They are just brilliant. I don't think I have to talk about why they're so good, but I'm going to anyway. The movement 3, weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 4, which is absolutely amazing, strength 3, toughness 4, 1 wound, initiative 2, 1 attack, leadership 9, and 11 points. Unfortunately, great weapons are a 2-point upgrade for these, 1 point for shields. You can take throwing axes for 1 point, replace your crossbows with throwing axes for free, but I don't see why you'd ever want to do that. So for these, it's 6 points for upgrade into the command group, and then the old Deadeye can replace his crossbow with a pistol or a brace of pistols. Now, the brace of pistols is 5 points, and I don't see a situation where you'd ever probably want to do this. Now, it's the special rules that make these absolutely spicy. So they have Dwarf Crafted, Move Through Cover, Open Order, Scouts, and Skirmishers. The Dwarf Crafted means that they're never going to suffer penalties when they are standing and shooting, which you're going to want to proc that with the throwing axes and the crossbows. I always think it's worth taking both. The reason for this is that the throwing axes have quick shot. What that means is if the enemy is within their movement and charges you, you still get your stand and shoot reaction, which is absolutely brilliant. And it also means that you could win that combat that you potentially couldn't have won before. Ballistic Skill 4 is also massive. Hitting on 3s natively and then 4s for long range is crazy. Now, if you chuck, say, Burlock in there with his scopes to make them not take long range penalties, suddenly you're hitting 30 inches away on 3s. It's a really nice bit of tech that you can do with the Rangers. For that tactic, I probably wouldn't scout them, but if you're playing against something that's going to be sitting back castling, or maybe playing against Wood Elves, or something that you need to kind of press your advantage in the game, I would definitely try scouting these as close as possible, because you're going to be upgrading them with great weapons and shields as well. So with their shields, they're going to be on a 4-up save because of the heavy armor. This does make them very durable. And then with the great weapons, they are strength 5. So they can do quite a lot of damage to, I would say, infantry and cavalry, and sometimes monsters. They do struggle into T6 monsters though, so if you can try and help it, try to keep them away from them. If you are playing into a massive T6 monster meta, one bit of advice I could give you is potentially play line hammer with these, which is have a big line of maybe 18 or 20, because then you can try and get as many attacks into that unit as possible. I know it doesn't look great on the board, but anything that helps us win games is always a good thing. So the Rangers can take skirmish. Now, I personally, after the FAQ, wouldn't take any big units of these in skirmish. The only units that I would do in skirmish are units of 5, and the only reason that I would use those little small units of 5 is potentially put them in front of stuff to create cover for those units, and then move them out when I wanted to do something. But I would say you're probably just going to stick in open order. I would definitely put these in some woods, because you've got your move through cover, which means that you get to reroll your 1s for the dangerous terrain tests, and you also don't suffer any negative to movement. So you can move through those woods almost freely, with probably none of them going to die. Remember as well, because they are open order, they do get a free pivot at the end of a move as well. You can pivot along line of these pretty quickly if you need to. Unfortunately, because the crossbows have ponderous and they don't have move and shoot, you are going to be at -3 to shoot a lot of the time if you have moved. But if you can get Burlock in there as well, at least you're going to be hitting a little bit better. I love the Rangers. They're such a nice pressure piece because they've got such a long range. They can hit really, really well. And the fact they have great weapons and shields, which means they're going to be hard to deal with. And you can also apply pressure where it's needed in the game. Whether that be taking them as scout and then applying pressure all onto one flank, just sitting back and trying to blast from a distance and try and get 2 or 3 turns of shooting and the stand of shoot to try and whittle those units down that are coming at you. One of the big downsides is the fact that the crossbows have no innate AP apart from if you roll 6s. They do have armor bane 2, which means on a 6 they proc into AP 2, but unfortunately, if you're like myself and you can't roll many 6s, you're better off shooting at stuff that doesn't have too much armor so that you can try and rip through that, considering you're hitting quite well normally. So next up, we have my favorite unit in the X-Force. This is the Scout Gyrocopters. Don't let the movement 1 deceive you, they do have fly 10. Weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 4, strength 4, toughness 4, 3 wounds, initiative 2, 2 attacks, leadership 9 for 60 points. These are monstrous cavalry on a 50 by 50 mil base. They have extended formation, which means that they can be 3 inches away from each other and still be in coherency. Fire and flee, which is absolutely massive. Fly 10, hatred orcs and goblins, hit and run, impact hits D3, magic resist 1, skirmishes, swift stride, and vanguard. What the hit and run does is, should it win a round of combat, the unit with this special rule may choose to fall back in good order rather than making up a follow-up or pursuit move. They are also armed with the clattergun. This is 24 inches, strength 4, AP 1, armor bane 1, dwarf crafted, move and shoot, multiple shots D6, and quick shot. These are absolutely amazing for board control, and also horrendously annoying for T6 monsters and dragons, because you can just zip around, get out of line of sight, and be taking pot shots with your D6 shots. With move and shoot and quick shot, you would normally always be hitting on 3s with the ballistic skill 4. Unfortunately, multiple shots does drop that by 1, so you're always going to pretty much be hitting on 4s, even if you're running around and getting out of lines of arc of those units. These are amazing and very, very irritating for combat monsters. Also with toughness 4, I know that's not as good as the normal Gyrocopter's toughness 5, but stuff is going to be having to shoot at them. So if you're playing against things that don't have any shooting and no access to any magical missiles, or if you're outplaying these, and you can always try to stay out of range of those magical missiles anyway, with your large move, that shouldn't be too much of a problem. With hit and run and fire and flee, you can be very, very irritating. The only time that I would probably use hit and run is if I'm charging into the rear or the flank of a unit. I managed to do some damage, and then I make them give ground. If you fall back in good order, then they can spin around to face you. So if they make a give ground, you can just zip backwards, and then they would have to spend an entire turn turning around, which then means your unit in front of them can just keep shooting at them. Fire and Flee is absolutely amazing. The way that you would set this up is by getting your gyrocopters just on the brink of their charge distance. So they would need a 6 to charge you, or they would need a max roll. Then you would fall back in good order away from them, so they would fail their charge, but then you would still get your shots off. This can be incredibly irritating and really good fun. Also, for the fact that they're very cheap, 120 points for 2 of these is really good. I would definitely be taking multiple units of these and trying to capitalize on just points denial, to be perfectly honest. Zipping around, getting out of charge arcs, and being very, very irritating. If your opponent's got war machines, these are quite good for zipping around and catching them. And I think the gyrocopter spam list can be very good. Not good in the way that people thought it would be. I don't think it's oppressive, but you can try and whittle down armies. If you're running a lot of gyrocopters, you're not going to win really big. But what you can do is just try and pick off some units, stay out of charge arcs, and try and win the game, maybe an 11-9 or a 12-8. But a win is definitely a win. Lastly, we have one of my favorite units in the entire game. So it is the Irondrakes. I always try to make room for these in my lists. And these guys are the only reason that I haven't been playing much with the Expeditionary Force, unfortunately, because you can't take them in that. I love either having 2 10-man units of these, or 3 5-man units so I can get the Trollhammer torpedoes, or something that I'm trying to do at the moment, which is the Drake Star list, where I've got a unit of 18 of them, which is absolutely horrendous on the stand and shoot. If you're not taking these in your Grand Army or your Royal Clans list, you need to start taking them now. They are usually MVPs in most games because they're ballistic skill shooting and they have a relatively short range. Unfortunately, some games they don't end up doing too much, but in a tournament, I would say 4 out of 5 games, they are amazing and they are the MVPs in those games. People have come to fear the Irondrakes, and I think it's duly justified because they are pretty amazing. So they have movement 3, weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 4, strength 4, toughness 4, 1 wound, initiative 2, 1 attack, leadership 9 for 15 points. And then the Iron Warden can get to ballistic skill 5 as well. The command squad can be upgraded for 6 points per model. The Iron Warden can replace his Drake gun with abrasive pistols or Trollhammer torpedo. You're always going to take the Trollhammer torpedo. It's absolutely brilliant. You can also take Cinder Blast bombs for 15 points. So that is a 30-point upgrade to your Iron Warden that you're always going to want to take, in my personal opinion. You can also be upgraded to Drilled for 1 point per model and get standard runes up to 50 points. The special rules that they have is Close Order, Detachment, Gromrill Armour, Hatred Orcs and Goblins, Magic Resist 1, Resolute, Runes of Warding, and Stubborn. The Runes of Warding is a model with this unit as a 5-up ward save against any wounds suffered that they caused by Flaming Attack special rule. This is absolutely amazing if you're playing against Battle Magic Wizards, as they will sit probably at the front of your army, as they'll be firing Pillar of Fire and Firebolts at them. So you can usually try and tank them quite well. If you've also cast the Anvil Rune for reroll saves, these can stick around really, really well. So let's have a look at the Trollhammer torpedo. 24-inch range, strength 8, AP 3, dwarf crafted, flaming attacks, and multi-wound D3. AP 3 natively is absolutely crazy. The Drake guns are 18-inch range, strength 5, AP 1, quick shot, and armor bane 2. So if you roll lots of 6s, you can get this unit very, very spicy indeed. They're absolutely amazing because this unit will just be moving up the board, potentially getting the Anvil's spell going off for the double move, and then trying to get the enemy in range as quickly as possible to fire those strength 5 and strength 8 shots out. With strength 5 across the entire unit, apart from the Trollhammer, they're going to be wounding toughness 6 monsters on 5s, which if you can roll well is really, really good. If the opponent charges you from inside their move, it doesn't matter because the Drake guns have quick shot, which means they can all shoot if they have line of sight, but the Trollhammer torpedo unfortunately doesn't have quick shot. So in that circumstance, you would be throwing your Cinder Blast grenades. These are D6 plus 1, hitting on 3s because they're not dwarf crafted. These can spike and do absolutely amazing, or not do much at all, but I love it when they spike. One champion doing the work of 7 Irondrakes is absolutely crazy. One bit of advice I will give is if you're being charged by a massive monster and also another unit's charging into you, I would do all my stand of shoot into the unit to try and get as much static combat res as possible. Then when the toughness 6 monster hits you, issue out a challenge with your champion to try and soak all those wounds, to try and save as many points as the Irondrakes as possible. Then hopefully you win combat, but if you don't, then I would pop my Stubborn, pop back through, and then the unit behind can then be in combat with the monster. And hopefully you've got a hero in there that can deal with it. I've personally found that if you have too big a unit, or with too many buffing heroes in there, people just try to avoid this unit. So what you can do is try and lull people to a false sense of security and get them to charge into them as a smaller unit, and then pop through and save their points. So those are my favorite units. Not war machines, not heroes, as I will be talking about the war machines in a separate video. I'm going to give an honorary mention to another 2 units that are absolutely amazing, but the reason they don't make it onto the list will become evident. So the hammerers are on paper absolutely brilliant. They are probably one of the best infantry models in the game. With their strength 6 hammers hitting at initiative, if you put the banner of confusion on them, then you're probably hitting at the same time or faster than stuff that's charging into you. Hammerers are amazing. Everybody knows they're amazing, and this is the problem. If they were a core unit, I would 100% be taking them, but you're putting so many points into something after you've already got your 500 points in core and your 500 to 1,000 points in heroes, that it becomes a block that people are just going to ignore. I love hammerers. I painted up 35 of them at the beginning of the edition because I really wanted to run hammerers, but unfortunately people just stay away from them. And it's really, really difficult to force your opponent to try and engage with them. And if they do engage with them, it's probably either going to be in your flank or your rear. So that's the reason that they're not on this list for the best, in my personal opinion, because on paper, they are the best. So nobody engages with them. And defensively, they're exactly the same as a warrior. So people can just pick through them as quickly as they'd be killing the warriors. My next honorary mention is going to be the handgunners in the expeditionary force. Now you can upgrade these to have expeditionary marksmen, so they don't suffer the negatives for moving and shooting. You can also put burlock in them, so you can have a big block of these, maybe 20, 25 big, moving across, and they can always be hitting on 4s, which is really, really nice. I think in the X-Force, there's a lot of utility with those, so I've maybe run a big unit of them, then with loads of gyrocopters and your moving and shooting artillery. The only reason they didn't make it into being one of my favorite units is because once they get charged, they are only weapon skill 3 and they don't have scout or anything that pips the rangers just above them. So those are some of the units that I think objectively are the best in our book. If you have different opinions, please let me know. When you're looking at the best dwarf units to take, you can't just look at the profiles for those units. You also need to look at what's going to be buffing them, whether that be the anvil for the +1 save rerolls or just the banner runes. Now, I always think that you need to try and match the banner rune for the unit it's going into. So if we have a quick look through the banners, we can try and work out what units they should go on and why you want to be taking them. So first up, we have the Master Rune of Grugni. The Battle Standard Bearer only, a unit carrying this standard inscribed with the Master Rune of Grugni has a 5-up ward save against any wounds affected. In addition, whilst the unit is within 6 inches of the model carrying this standard, friendly units get a 6-up ward from shooting suffered during the shooting phase. This is absolutely amazing. I always take this on BSB. I can't see a game where I wouldn't want to take this. I would always try to put this in a big block where I'm trying to keep alive and keeping a unit of drakes within 6 inches in front of them so that they could pop stubborn back through them, but also take advantage of the 6-up ward that the banner gives. I did try recently at a tournament putting this guy in a big unit of Irondrakes, but unfortunately people just didn't want to come anywhere near him. So I think putting him in a combat unit is probably the way to go, or popping backwards and forwards where you need him to be. The Master Rune of Stormy Redbeard, when calculating its combat result, any friendly unit within the command range of this model carrying the standard inscribed with the Master Rune of Stormy Redbeard may claim an additional +1 combat res point. I really like this, but the only problem is you're going to be picking this over the Master Rune of Grugni because it is command range of the model, so it has to go onto your BSB, unfortunately. And I would always choose the Rune of Grugni over this. Next up, we have the Master Rune of Hesitation. We all love this one. An enemy unit that charges in the front arc of a unit carrying the standard inscribed with the Ruse of Hesitation does not count as having charged for the purposes of choosing which weapon to use or using any special rules it may have. So you can turn off all of those charge bonuses, turn off impact hits, and just basically neuter lance formations. I absolutely love the Banner of Hesitation. This is really good to put on your frontline units just to try and stop maybe like the first charge units or any chariots coming towards you. It is brilliant. And if you're playing against orcs, it does stop chopper as well. So anything that's going to take a brunt of a hit from a massive unit of pigs is going to want to go on that. Rune of Confusion, any enemy unit that charges you from the front arc of a unit carrying the standard inscribed with the Rune of Confusion makes a disordered charge. I love the Rune of Confusion on the hammerers, but I don't think there's too much point to take it on anything else unless you're going to be relying on hitting with your hand weapon and shield and potentially try and hit at the same time, or maybe try and hit in front of stuff that's using great weapon. But I think most of the time you're probably going to want to take this on hammerers if you've taken hammerers. Rune of Fear for 30 points. A unit carrying the standard inscribed with the Rune of Fear gains the Fear special rule. Now I can see that this could be useful if you're running absolutely massive blocks, but I just don't think it has a use most of the time. Rune of Battle. When calculating the combat result for a unit carrying the standard inscribed with the Rune of Battle may claim an additional bonus of +1 combat result. This is exactly how you get units up to combat res 7 with the BSB in there, or just static combat res of 5. It's really good, and for only 25 points, it's brilliant. The Stroller's Rune, a unit carrying the standard inscribed with the Stroller's Rune, gains the Vanguard special rule. If you're running a Yeet list and you want to try and get in your opponent's face as quickly as possible, or if you're going to be running units of Irondrakes and you want to get them up the board a little bit faster so they can get in range, this is definitely worth using, and I think people have been sleeping on this rune. It's very, very good. Now, the Rune of Courage, 15 points. A unit carrying the standard inscribed with the Rune of Courage automatically passes Fear and Terror tests. Now, I see a lot of people missing this one out, but I actually think this is probably one of the best runic standards that we have. Having to not worry about running away from a dragon charging you is absolutely massive for your combat unit. If you fail a terror test with a unit that's got ranged weapons, you can't stand and shoot and you just start running away. And then you could be caught and killed straight away. So that is a really, really strong rune to take. I would suggest taking that on most of your units. So with those buffs, and the buffs that the Anvil can give and the runesmiths can give, you can really get your units to a place where they are very, very strong. Please let me know if you agree with me or you disagree with me. I know some of you are going to say Ironbreakers. Yes, Ironbreakers are absolutely amazing defensively, but unfortunately they just don't do any combat damage. They can anchor things, but by the time that you've anchored something, you've then got more and more units coming into you. So I really, really struggle at seeing these played at a hyper competitive level. For fun games, 100% they are a great unit, and I love me some Ironbreakers. But I think in the meta that we're all playing into now, they are quite hard to use. If you have any thoughts on what your favourite or what you think of the best units are, please let me know down below. Let me know how I'm wrong, and I will catch you again on the next video. Take care. Bye.